Are the cruise lines too big to fail? It seems like we're just at the beginning of this process, but that question already being asked and answered. There's a lot of opinions out there that says if the cruise ships go down, let them sink. Well, is that a reasonable expectation? In today's episode of the Lido Loca Cruise Show, we're going to talk about why people feel what way they feel on both sides of this issue. Let's talk about saving the cruise lines. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Lido Loca Cruise Show. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoy cruising, you like to be updated on what's going on, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. This is one of those inevitable conversations as the purse strings of a nation, of a global economy starts to tighten up, where businesses are closed. There's a lot of questions out there that who needs help, who should get it, and who shouldn't get it. And there's already been some vocal opposition to helping out the cruise lines. But why? Well, there's been a few arguments laid out. Let me lay them out for you just so you get a sense of why people are saying, no, let's not help the cruise lines if they are in financial trouble. Probably one of the simplest arguments that I've seen put forth is that cruise lines are non-essential. We're basically talking about, should we pump money into saving a vacation type? This would be like asking, should we make sure that Disney stays afloat? Should we make sure that Busch Gardens parks can open up again? This is really just a vacation type. It's different than airlines. It's different than banking infrastructure. These are just some people with some cruise ships providing vacation. Really, should we be spending money from our taxpayers to save a vacation type? I've heard that one put forth. Another one, more interestingly, are these American companies anyways? A lot of people are pointing out that many of the major cruise lines incorporated in different countries so that they can do business a different way. Yes, they have their headquarters down there in Miami. They have a lot of American employees, but when it comes to the incorporation of the business, not all of them incorporated in the United States. And then, of course, almost every cruise ship, save one, not registered in the United States, taking advantage of flags of convenience, which allows vessels to be flagged in foreign countries and not holding them to the same rules and regulations as employers as if those ships were flagged here in the United States. Some people old school pointing out the environmental issues that cruise lines have had, and then there's some people that put the current crisis smack dab on the shoulders of the cruise line. Those are some reasons why people are saying that you should not bail out the cruise lines. And look, I've read and I've listened to and I've watched a lot of this anti-cruising rhetoric, and I can appreciate some of the arguments. These are things that many cruisers struggle with. The relationship between the cruise lines, its employees, how employees are paid, conservation. Those are all things even before this current crisis that were brought to the forefront. I'm completely interested in the business side of cruising, how incorporating in foreign countries, what that means for their tax profile, what that means for their labor practices. And yes, so it's interesting in cruising. It's the only, like I've said it before, it's the only vacation type where all of a sudden I'm worried about labor issues and tax laws, those kind of things. I've never, went to Chuck E. Cheese and thought, wow, I wonder, if the guy in the mouse costume is being paid enough and what kind of tax breaks from the city is Chuck E. Cheese getting. I've never had that thought, but for some reason, because cruising is so front and center and it's such a in-your-face kind of industry, those questions arise. Let's address some of the issues. Is it a big deal that the cruise uses flags of convenience? Is it a big deal that cruise lines flag their ships in other countries? Well, for me, as I thought about this for the last few days, I'm like, okay, obviously they're taking advantage of a system which allows them to get a different workforce, pay the workforce different than if it was an all-American workforce. And obviously, it's a business making it work. Business often looks at human beings in two ways. It's a balancing act. You understand the human element, but you also look at labor as a resource on a piece of paper that you have to manage, you have to minimize, you have to do the best with. I think of it like this. I'm not mad at Apple because they build my iPhone in China. Obviously, they're in China because they can make an iPhone for less money there than they can if they had a factory there in California or on the West Coast somewhere. So businesses are making those decisions all the time. So the fact that they use flags of convenience to lower their costs to make more profit, all of a sudden, does that villainize the cruise industry? I would say, I guess, as much as it villainizes any other industry that is looking for ways to make more profit by reducing costs. Reality check here. This is how the American system works. I'll be bold. This country was founded on commerce. The first settlers to the United States were people with a commerce bent in mind. They came to settle the new world for resources so that they could make more money back in England. Now, fortunately, a lot of other things have happened as far as religious freedom, those kind of things. But if you think about it, this country founded on a lot of ideas. One of those ideas was how to have a market where you could make more profit. It's baked into the American system. You can agree with that, you can disagree with it, but history would prove that money makes this country go, and that's a lot of what we're talking about right now. Should we save cruising? Is it essential? It's not essential in the idea that you have to go on vacation, but you can ask the question, is it essential because it affects the American economy? Is it essential because it affects American jobs? Cruising is important to many economies around the United States. The Miami Herald, just looking at South Florida, says that the cruise industry has about a $9 billion per year impact on the economy there in Miami. $9 billion in the city of Miami, that's a significant number. And then the Cruise Lines International Association, or CLIA, the trade industry for cruise lines, notes that cruising supports about 421,000 U.S.-based jobs and close to 1.7 million jobs globally. That's a whole lot of jobs. One of the factors that comes into play whether or not to bolster a business, to bail out a business, is what kind of human impact does it have? And that's a significant amount of jobs that could be affected if the cruise lines go out of business. These cruise lines pay a fee every time they bring their cruise ships into port. And so not only does this have a United States impact, this has a global impact. Here's what I know. As you followed along the last few weeks as we've gone through this crisis, the president often favorably mentions the cruise lines. It could be a signal, it could be an indicator that he would be willing to help out the cruise lines if they got into financial trouble. What I do understand from what I've watched and what I've heard so far, of course, it could change, that the bailout that everybody is talking about, the stimulus that everybody's talking about, at least for businesses, come in the forms of low or no interest loans that have to be repaid. So there could be an argument made that it's not just money that's being given away to businesses that are being bailed out. It is a lifeline. It is an infusion of cash to keep these businesses going. Now, the interesting thing is several of the cruise lines have bolstered their own financial position. Arnold Donald, the CEO of Carnival Corporation, the holding company that holds major lines like Carnival Cruise Lines, Princess, Costa, the whole family of Carnival Cruise Lines, he said just last week that he's not looking for a bailout. We saw a story yesterday, Royal Caribbean activating liquid money, $2 billion of liquid money. So the cruise lines are positioned in a way where they can fund themselves, at least in the short term. So all this talk of bailout, we won't know until time passes. And I understand why the question's there. We're moving into a time of this crisis where there's going to be a question, who needs money? Where does the money come from? And who's going to fund it all? That is a question that will have to be answered. But back to the main question, should the cruise lines receive a bailout? If you are a hardcore free market capitalist, nobody gets a bailout. The market decides who wins and who loses, and the winners win and the losers have to go home, regardless of how many jobs are lost, regardless of the impact on other industries. If you are a pure free market capitalist, that could be one approach. The free market does not necessarily reign when it comes to the U.S. economy. There is always a measured amount of intervention put forth by the government, and that will be true in this scenario. The government will decide where it helps out, where it does not help out. Do I believe the cruise line should have the ability to ask for financial help in the form of a low interest loan to stay afloat? To me, the reality is there are many economies around the country. There are many economies in the Caribbean, and there are many people that would be disadvantaged if the cruise lines suddenly had to close up shop and not have a business anymore. I do believe that if there is a need for funds to be infused into that industry and there is some sort of bailout loan program that exists, I would not exclude the cruise lines from it. And look, I've tried to put aside the fact that I would be somebody displaced if the cruising industry went out of business. Hopefully I've offered some rational reasons why, but I do think there's enough of a human and job component that it's good to keep this industry around. Are there things that the cruise lines could do better? Always. That's true for every person, for every business out there. And again, they're in the spotlight, and I'm sure there will be some takeaways from this that will make them stronger going forward. Well, that's just my opinion. I would love to hear what you think. Should we bail out the cruise lines, or should we let them sink? What an interesting ring. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you found something helpful in this video, please show your support by hitting that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. This is Tony for the Lido Loca Cruise Show, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.